Good morning, members. Chairman, appreciate y'all working hard and getting things done like this. And, I've said this before with other pieces of legislation that we have all worked on and done, that when you bring people together, a lot of good things can happen. So thank all you parents and teachers and everybody who's involved in this for your emails and your phone calls and your support for doing this. This is huge for our state. So let me start, though, by asking everyone here to not forget about the dozens of parishes from the bottom of the state to the top of the state that was devastated by the hurricane. I spent the last week in nearly every single one of those parishes. They are hurting badly, and they have a long road ahead of them. Please continue to pray for those citizens and those peoples in those areas. When COVID hit Louisiana in March, I don't think any of us were prepared to face what we had and know what we had coming. The loss of life, the economy devastation, and the overwhelm and being overwhelming. We listened to our experts, we stayed home, we closed businesses, we adjusted to what I like to call a temporary, abnormal situation. We flattened the curve. All of us worked together to do that. As we began to reopen for the first time, we were hit with another spike and more deaths, and even harder on the economy. We saw cases spike and hospitalizations rise to levels that were just overwhelming. Again, everyone here in our great state, we rallied together despite all of the hitting and the wearing of the mask and keeping our distances. And again, we flattened the curve with that as well. Which brings us to today. Our hospitalizations are down, our case growths are slowing due to the people of this state stepping up and doing what is asked of them. Now it's time to move forward responsibly and together. I'm confident that we begin to move out of the temporary abnormal and begin to restore a sense of normal life while still following public and health guidelines. We have no choice. It's time to do this. I called this meeting, myself and Chairman Garofalo, to focus on our children's future. They need to be in school, they need to return to sports, and they need to do it safely. I want to be very clear. This meeting and following actions is not an attempt to ignore public safety and advise the best practices. It's about beginning to move out of a temporary abnormal back to life. To this point, no one is grabbing the bull. At this point, no one has grabbed the bull by the horns and taking leadership on this issue, allowing our children to return to a competitive sport. So that's what we are doing here today. We will have all the stakeholders in this room today to get this done. Over the last several weeks, we have met and listened to parents, teachers, principals, the High School Association, Bessie, the governor, and medical professionals. We talked about how we can return to sports and turn the Friday night lights on, not to turn them back off. It's time to snap up our chin straps and cheer for those home teams. In order to do that, we must continue to proceed cautiously and deliberately, unlike some of our neighboring states that went back to football way too quickly and have now had to stop playing football. To that end, I worked with the healthcare experts at Our Lady of the Lake to develop and set up recommendations that we will release today, meant to guide schools alongside the Louisiana Department of Health, LHSAA, and advise in returning to sports safely. It's time for our kids to be back in school, playing sports. It's time for our businesses to begin coming back to life. It's time for our state to move to phase 3. City councils across the state have already voting on moving themselves out. It's happening. If we don't have a plan in place with guidelines, we set ourselves up for failure. I know that we can do this today. I know that we can and will do this safely. And I know together we can accomplish anything. I want to thank each and every one of you. Y'all know how important y'all are to us here, and the things and everything that we were successful doing in session this past year shows that we can get things done and we can do it the right way. And today is another step for that. So thank everybody here. God bless each and every one of you, and let's get it done. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much for the leadership on this issue in particular. Members, first we're going to go ahead and take up the high school football issue that we've been wrestling with for so long. Before we get started, well, let me take care of a little bit of housekeeping before I forget. We do have overflow rooms. We have the entire floor. We have all 4 rooms in the basement today. If there's someone in another room in the overflow room that wants to ask that wants to be a witness or give us testimony, make sure that you chime in. I will try to take a little bit of extra time between people. I'm hoping that we don't have too much testimony after what I'm about to say. But I have to tell you that, we are still maintaining safe distances. So please, adhere to that, and we'll do our best to get you in here. If you're going to come to the table, or if you want to give testimony or chime in, please fill out a card. Make sure you sign the card, and your signature is an attestation that you are telling the truth. And green cards, of course, are in favor. Red cards are opposed. White cards are for informational purposes only. So let me read this list. I had to make a list because my phone has gone dead several times this week because I've been on the phone so much. But first off, I want to thank the Speaker in particular because for his leadership in allowing us to have this meeting. I want to thank the Governor and the Governor's office, the Attorney General. Mr. Stiles is here. Thank you for everything you've done for us, Bill. The Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, Bessie, they have stepped up. Ms. Holloway's here as well. She's going to make a statement for us. Louisiana Department of Education, Mr. Brumley. Louisiana High School Athletic Association, Mr. Bonine. Louisiana State Fire Marshal, Butch Browning. The Lake Hospital, Our Lady of the Lake Hospital. My entire committee, who works tirelessly on these issues, and believe me, we've been going back and forth on this and several other issues because we have so many issues to deal with right now. All of my colleagues in the House, several of whom are with us here today and are going to hopefully not ask too many questions. My staff and entire staff in the legislature, we've done a lot of research on this issue. There's a lot of legal issues that we were concerned about, and I'm really glad we have some of the best staff in the country in Louisiana. All the coaches that reached out to me, several of them are here today to give us testimony. The parents, the athletes, all the attendees that drove from all over the state to come and testify today. Those of you who took the time to email, I can't tell you, I've received hundreds, if not thousands, of emails, both in my office and here at the Capitol. The media, I've spoken to several members of the media who have chimed in and given us input. All of our friends and constituents. I mean, it's really, this has been a collaborative effort. The Speaker talks about it all the time. We work collaboratively, and when we work collaboratively, we're usually able to come up with a solution. And that is the announcement, the big announcement today, is we have come up with a solution. Mr. Bonine and his chief counsel were concerned about some liability issues. The Attorney General stepped up and has written an opinion that has addressed those issues and has satisfied their concerns about the liability issues that they didn't want to face and their member institutions did not want to face. So we believe we're, at this point today, able to say that we're going to move forward. So I'm going to bring up Mr. Bonine and have him tell us, if you don't mind, if you're ready, Mr. Bonine, exactly how this will unfold, when we can get started. We've talked about expediting. We heard that, is it Michigan, Kevin? Michigan has issued an executive order to move up their schedule. There are some issues with that in Louisiana, and our athletes, our football players, haven't been really practicing the way that they should. But Mr. Bonine, if you come to the table and give us an idea of what kind of schedule we're looking at and how we can move forward, we'd really appreciate it. And also at the table with Mr. Bonine is Mr. Mark Boyer, who is Chief Counsel for the LHSAA. Good morning, and thank you for coming.
Good morning, and good morning, committee, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity, and again to the Speaker for the introduction this morning. He nailed it. I truly believe that. Not knowing the timelines here this morning, but First of all, we have approximately 27 parishes and 179 of our 404 member schools that were affected one way or the other, from they're waiting for power to come on and they can resume educational processes to they're not going to have anybody in a building for the remainder of the year. And those student athletes and students in general have been displaced. And I want all of you to know, and those watching and listening, that we are working cooperatively with those families wherever they land. They're going to get their students enrolled in those schools, and they're going to have sport opportunities. We'll waive those rules that we need right now for eligibility, and we're going to work cooperatively. And if and when they are able to move back to their communities, then that eligibility is going to go back with them, and they'll be able to go back home and play where they need to. Because we already had, of our 4 fall sports, we already had cross-country runners running. Volleyball is in the process of starting their schedule next week. They're playing and participating in inter-squads, as well as swimmers are swimming. So we're already 3/4 of the way there whenever the hurricane hits. So know that we're not going to stand in the way of those individuals' problems that they already have brought by a natural disaster. It's not going to, they're going to be able to try to have some normal life someplace else, and athletics is an important piece of that. As Speaker mentioned, I was sitting in Lake Charles in March when we heard the first portion of anything about the pandemic. We were hosting our state boys basketball championships. And it went from you can only have 1,000 people to 250, and I had staff down there, and we had heard that the NCAA had canceled March Madness. And we all went, what? 2 days later, before we started our final championships with nobody in the Burton Arena as spectators, we had heard that the NCAA had canceled the men's baseball College World Series in Omaha. What do they know that we don't? But I will say this, that we were the last event nationally that was played after the pandemic had been identified, and those 2 basketball games where we crowned champions, and then we left the facility. That following, I think Tuesday or Wednesday, is when we had the shelter-in-place order, and we know the rest of that story. That was probably one of the toughest decisions I'd had to make as your executive director, was not having fans and parents in a facility for a state championship. And I thought that would be probably the toughest one I would have to make, not knowing that just a few weeks later we would be discussing with the executive committee of the LHSAA, which is comprised of principals across our state, as well as liaisons from the Superintendent's Association, Department of Ed, State School Boards Association, and the Coaches Association. They would be looking at canceling spring sports and some of our winter sports that had not finalized, which would be powerlifting, that we weren't going to be able to finish those seasons for those athletes. That was the toughest decision I'd had to make in my career as an executive director. And I had to sit at the table in my house and tell my senior son that he was not going to have a senior's track season. Little did I know he was not going to have an in-person graduation or a prom or anything else that went with it. And I'm speaking to the choir in this room of everybody understands how that went. But we were patient in what we did and how we did it. What leads me to where we are today. As we move through summer workouts, setting up restrictions and working not only with the National Federation of State High Schools, which is the national organization that oversees all of us, 20,000 high schools, over 8 million student athletes, and individuals participate in the fine arts. That we have worked our way through stages of this progress of opening up safely, as well as all those initiatives that were put to place here in Louisiana that we've adhered to. And we've moved through those. The teachers in our schools, the coaches in our schools, the athletic directors, the vice principals, the guidance counselors, the principals, and all of the central office, parish board, have been working their tails off since March to where we are today. Some parishes have not started school yet. We're still looking for that to start next week. Majority of them have. And of our, like I mentioned earlier, of our 4 fall sports, 3 are competing as we sit here today. And when it came to football, our football coaches, their team of coaches, the medical personnel, athletic trainers across our state, which we have some of the best, I want to add. Our sports medicine advisory chairman, Dr. Greg Stewart's done an incredible job, yeoman's work, late hours, weekends, on ensuring where we sit today. And the athletes, they've done everything that we have asked them to do. Every restriction, every guideline, they've done what they were supposed to do. And I'm very confident with that, of what they've done to where we sit today. We feel as though we're at that point where we have been very patient. The emails and letters and communications that you receive from very loyal and caring families across our state, I've been receiving those for about 4 to 6 weeks, and I understand that. But we knew if we displayed some patience and didn't get past the anxiety piece, waited diligently for potentially the most recent order, that maybe we would have the chance, as Speaker mentioned, in moving to a different phase. We have proven, our coaches have proven, that in the present phase that we're in, working religiously in the static groups of 25, and they've been doing that since the beginning of August. They're good at it. And our coaches are doing it, and our trainers are doing it. And if there is an incident where an athlete or athletes or a coach or coaches have a symptom or have a fever, when they're checked when they come in, they know what to do now. They know to isolate. They know to do the contact tracing. They know how to do all that. They've done it and have been very good at it, to the point where sometimes they've had to take a pause. But those are far and few between. But I did ask the Federation if they had any recent information on the 17 states that have already started football. And as we sit here today, Mr. Bob Colgate is the one of the assistant executive directors at the Federation, but he's also the Sports Medicine Advisory Liaison Chair, that we had not had any hospitalizations nor had any outbreaks that was recorded that was causing major issues. There are a couple of counties and some states that have had to back off. I think Mr. Speaker addressed that, maybe started too early. But I believe the patience has paid off for the state of Louisiana, where we sit today, and I'm here to acknowledge that. And now with the representation that I hold for the 100,000 athletes across our state, our 10,000 plus coaches and close to 5,000 officials and 404 principals and their administrative teams, and then the representation of our executive committee, that the superintendents, that we're ready to, it's time. And the hurricane didn't help, if you will. We'd still be having this conversation. And this state has been resilient. We saw that historically when we had Katrina and what have devastated that portion of our state in New Orleans and Orange Parish. And shortly thereafter, the state continued with football and prayed for everybody, and we can rebound, and I've seen that here. So, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the LHSAA and all, I appreciate your work for this, and I am ready to take recommendation to my executive committee, which we've already had that conversation with them. We have a scheduled meeting next Wednesday, and this item would be on that agenda to establish the additional guidelines that I have stolen from other states. Alabama and Tennessee, I spoke to them yesterday. They've already been down this road, and it's not between the lines that seems to be the difficulty. It seems to be what goes on in the stands, and fans in the stands with when it comes to the protocols. And we'll work diligently with that. But all the entities that you just mentioned, including your office and others, will be working with Mr. Speaker, and what we come up with, present that, get that approved, and if everything goes as planned, I would anticipate we could put football players in full gear, start full contact, because those young men have been in helmets and shoulder pads for 6 weeks. they're ready to put on the lower gear and get after it. And I'm a firm believer of that, and I feel very confident with medical personnel, our trainers, our coaches, and what they have done to prepare us for this day. It's been time coming, but patience has paid off, and I do not see any delay in why we would not start football as the scheduled date of October 8th, 9th, and 10th.
All right. I just wanted to make sure. You said you're going to bring it to the board. You've had no reason to believe that your board would have any problems with anything we're talking about today.
I do not, and it is a principals organization, and they have been very supportive, and they represent all across the state, and it's time we start bringing some of that back, and it's time to play football in Louisiana.
Excellent. The principals that I've spoken to are all highly in favor of this as well. Everybody believes that it's good for the students and it's good for the student athletes. And if you look at some of the statistics that show the harm that comes from not playing, it's overwhelming. And you didn't mention that, but I thought that was important to get into the record. Let's take a quick question from Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank, the Speaker, you, Representative Chairman Garofalo, everybody involved. This is, strong evidence of hard work and just making things happen. Mr. Bonine, I really appreciate what you all are trying to do. I look forward to seeing this implemented, but I think I want to give a lot of credit to the families out there that,
Agreed.
Kept everybody's feet to the fire. That's across the state, certainly in my district and many others. I hope people realize that this is evidence for the future that, families, parents, people can really push to have something happen in this state. I think there's a feeling out there at times that, what can I do? Voting doesn't even matter, that type of thing. And I think people are seeing that that's not true. So thank you for your work on this. Thank you, everybody. And looking forward to seeing a game this fall.
And I would add to that many of those people are in this room today. So thank you guys very much. Representative, I can't see, Brass for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I, too, Mr. Bonine, just like to commend you on your leadership with putting a good foot forward. I'm, too, a strong believer that our kids need to get back to some normalcy in football, and allowing our kids to go back to playing sports is a part of a step in the right direction. A couple questions, one in reference to football, and then another one in reference to some other fall sports. You and I have had multiple conversations where I've asked a question as far as communication and reporting protocol, as far as coaches, athletic directors that's not in the same school districts. So, for example, if St. James High School was playing E.D. White High Schools, which are in two different parishes, are you guys planning on putting some type of protocol communication process in place to where if a coach tests positive for COVID the Saturday morning after they played a football game that Friday night, to where St. James or E.D. White or the other school can be notified of some potential issues with quarantining or having to get their players and coaches tested?
Yes, sir. That's going to be part of that plan, which is also happening in other states as well. We, and you've been around a while. Before the week of the game, those coaches and athletic directors communicate on a lot of different logistical pieces on whether they're hosting or they're traveling, and we'll implement a piece of that as well. But also, I believe yesterday there was a mandate sent out to schools of a reporting process for cases, which would also include if we have athletes that do so. And that's a good point, because I didn't touch on that. That if that scenario happens and there is some quarantining and a school or a school team gets to a position where they don't have enough to compete or something happens, that's not going to be held against them at that particular point. It's not, they'll be avoiding the schedule, and if somebody else hasn't, we can work under the void, we can work a scheduling piece if that be the case, so we can continue to move this forward. I've used an analogy before. This process, as you mentioned, is new. It's going to be a whiteboard effect for me. I'm not going to write with a permanent marker on that. It's going to be a dry erase. So as we move through this and we need to make pieces and make adjustments, we're going to do that and not put ourselves into a corner. Use common sense and yield to those individuals in our membership schools that are out there in the field, no pun intended, in the field doing that for us and keeping that communication. I believe that this communicated piece on a regular year is very good. We hear about that. And I also want to make mention that can't forget about our officials. because if the officials don't want to officiate for fear of potentially coming in contact with that, with the virus, that's okay, because we're going to work with assignment secretaries for that as well, to communicate with them as well as if there's an outbreak or there is a case of a kid or a coach that in a visiting school. To my knowledge right now, I sit here confidently thinking that whatever's going on in Livingston Parish with their program would be comparable, if not the same, of what would be going on in Ascension Parish. And as we do the cross parishes and participation in different classifications or divisions, that I feel confident that that's going to be the case. We'll continue to monitor it, and if we feel as though there's some that are not doing it to the standard in which we would appreciate, I'll work directly with the school administration and the superintendent of that respective parish to make sure that that happens.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, I know we're allowing the kids, putting a process of playing in place to allow the kids to go back to playing football. Have we had any discussion as far as spectators attending, and not only football, but all fall sports? I've had a number of calls from swim
Yes,
team
sir.
parents, from volleyball parents that's currently not allowed to see their kids play as a result of the capacity restrictions on entering buildings. Have we had any discussion as far as expanding that capacity to allow spectators, or especially parents, to attend games to watch the kids play?
Yes, sir. I believe it's out today. Open Safely Louisiana, that website for the LHSAA. The Department of Ed worked with the State Fire Marshal in establishing that, and the governor's office. And as it sits today, that would be 50% capacity.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative Larry Freeman for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you allowing me to sit in the committee today, even though I'm not a member, so I appreciate that and being involved. Mr. Bonine, I do want to thank you for your cooperation. You and I have had some conversations, and you've been very gracious and very forthcoming with information, and I truly appreciate that. I just want to go over a couple of things that you said. Now, you said that you're going to have an executive committee meeting coming up this week or next week?
It's the 9th.
The 9th.
Next Wednesday, sir.
Okay. And at that executive committee meeting, the executive committee is going to decide whether it will go forward with football as scheduled for October 9th, correct?
That is correct.
Now, just to be sure, because I know these parents want to know good information and may want to leave here with some solid things in their mind. Is the decision to go forward, is it based on anything that has to do with the governor's phases? If the governor does not change phases between now and October 9th, is that going to stop football from going forward?
No, sir.
Okay. After the 9th meeting, will you be issuing a statement of the results of that meeting publicly so all of these folks will know exactly what's going to happen on October 9th?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your information.
Maybe I should have been more exacting in my questions. Thank you, Representative Freeman, for clearing all of that up. Representative Amy Freeman for a question.
No, it's Barbara.
Oh, it is? I'm sorry.
Yet, but I will.
Okay, Representative Freiberg for a question. I'm sorry. My
I
eyes
wanted to
aren't working that well.
I want to thank all of you for being here, and I wanted to piggyback on what Representative Wright said. I was particularly impressed by the letters of support that I got from the individual youth who are participating in these sports, and to me that was particularly impressive, and I thank you for getting involved in this process because it means a lot. The second thing I'd just ask quickly is your group is the only one that has to approve. Bessie doesn't have to approve this, do they?
That is correct. We oversee the athletic piece, and we are free and clear of that with them. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm very excited. Thank you.
As are the rest of us. Thank you, Representative Freiberg. Representative Carter for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bonin, it's good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you, before football, is there any plans or protocols in place for the actual testing of athletes playing football?
The plans that I have seen from the two states I mentioned, including Georgia, which I didn't have in front of me, there's not any testing going on there. at any of those facilities. There's a cost incurred for that, and we're not going to be one to mandate a mandate that's unfunded. But the testing is not. But we have, and I've personally mentioned earlier in my testimony, I'm very confident in what's going on, practices we have now, and honestly, I think our athletes, and I use the term, it seems to be in common with professional sports, that bubble. They come to practice, they're dog tired when they leave. They go home, they eat, they're doing their homework, they're doing their studies, and they're back the next day. Not a lot of time to get out and roam around and go other places. And once the season begins, many in this room have played football. You know, you play Friday night football, you show up Saturday morning, for film and to lick your wounds and see the trainer, and then you potentially come back, coaches meet, you come back and look at your opponent on Sunday. There's no real lot of time to go out and about, where the congregate group of the actual school itself could very well be out doing other things and not practicing what the athletes have been practicing, and that includes all of our athletes in cross country, swimming, volleyball now, and then now football.
It's my understanding, based upon some of the science that I've been observing, is that most of the teenagers and people of that age group, that they may have COVID and be asymptomatic, or the symptoms may not be severe at that age group. But just like you just mentioned, that when they get finished playing that football game, or they get finished practice or what have you, that they go home and they may live with a grandparent, or they may live with someone who is in fact who's at risk. What plans or processes or procedures do we have in place to track whether or not there's any of the families of those athletes? How do we track if there's an outbreak? If the athletes may be bringing it home and spreading it to community members, family members? Is there any what's the thought process? I'm sure that's been considered. So just at least take us through it, because I know that we have people watching and listening, and I want the families of the athletes to be safe, that if their kid is going to play football and a kid is coming home, that the kid isn't accidentally spreading this horrible disease. So take us through the thought process of protecting not just the athletes, but their families.
And for fall sports, we have approximately 32,000 participants. 19,000 of those are football players, and then the other three sports are the remaining balance. So if an athlete is asymptomatic, and the temperature check is not always the telltale sign that they may not have that temperature, could very well have another symptom or not be asymptomatic.
They can be positive for COVID and not have a fever.
That, from my understanding, unless there's another doctor in the room, there's been situations where I didn't have a symptom at all, didn't even have a fever, and individuals have ended up, whether it be.
So what do you do there? Let's say an athlete comes to, let's say there's a student athlete who is positive but is asymptomatic. They're
separated from the participation, and then go into the quarantine phase. And at that particular juncture, the medical personnel, if we're talking football, the trainers then start doing the process of elimination in regards to contact tracing, whether it be at the school or with the team or with the coaching staff, and then notification of the family would know. But also, go back to your original question, if a family member comes in contact and does contract COVID-19 somewhere outside of their home, whether it be at the store or off of a gas nozzle, putting gas in your vehicle, then at that particular juncture, the way the communication piece would be that athlete would also let the coaching staffs and the trainers at the site know that their grandmother, their aunt, their uncle, someone like that has now tested positive, so we can start that process as well. So it's a two-way street for communication.
We're doing that that's part of the plan, is to actually trace that and track that.
That's in the plan, but that's not what we've been doing to this point. But that'll be addressed, because now we're also putting 50% occupancy in our stadiums and in our gymnasiums, and we're still going to work through with conversation with council and schools, because of what is in place now with I believe with Act 9. Anyone that comes onto that campus is supposed to have a temperature check. So does that mean that someone's going to sit at the gate for a Friday night football game and check everyone's temperature as we come through. Those are things we're going to discuss before we get to our executive committee meeting next week.
And this will be my final question, and it's part of a remark too. I'm looking at the letter from the Attorney General that's dealing with Act 9, that's dealing with the liability of the schools. And I guess my focus isn't the liability of the schools or the school associations, or my concern is the health and safety of our students. It's the health and safety, not just of those students, but their families, in the communities. I mean, that's all of us. I mean, it's my understanding this disease passes quickly and fast. So I would just want to make certain that whatever we do it in a way that's driven by the safety and welfare of not only those students, but their families and their parents and loved ones. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Carter. And I believe that that's what we're doing, correct, Mr. Bonine?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Representative Mincy for a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to reiterate some of my colleagues and just thank all those that were involved with helping us put this together today. It's been a lot of effort, and I want to thank everyone. But just to follow up on Representative Carter's concerns, first of all, we have a logistical issue with resources out there for one thing, and I think all of our school systems would love to test their athletes, but we can't test adequately throughout the state as it is. But they're working towards that. Another concern would be for we have just as much community infection as we would at the schools, and most of our school systems are doing a good job. They've been challenged with doing this own reporting themselves. Livingston Parish, we started August the 7th, I believe, and we've been reporting, and watching all that ourselves as well. And I think Department of Health rolled out something yesterday that we're looking at that we're going to probably talk about in a little bit. But all their concerns, Mr. Carter, they've already been addressing as well. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Mincy. And as we're sitting here, we had another question. I think you told me prior to the meeting that you would get into this, Mr. Bonine. We have a student in Lake Charles that wants to attend a high school but can't find adequate housing in that high school district. Will that be waived for these kids? As of now, a kid wants to attend Turlings. I'm assuming that's a school. He has to live in Northside's district. You mentioned something about waivers and allowing students, particularly in the hurricane-ravaged areas, to be able to play in different districts. Can you elaborate on what that plan is?
Yes, sir. I sent a communication out shortly after the disaster to membership, knowing that those questions were going to come up, and we had a trial run with the flood in 2016 as well. So people were dispersed from their homes. That we can't. The rule is specific about if you do leave and you go someplace, we would prefer you live in that attendance zone of where you want to be, but also know that that's not necessarily always going to work out. And each case, we have 3 forms that go with it. They'll fill out, submit it. Every case will come across my desk, and I will use common sense, and we'll make sure we get this done in the right way and not step on anyone's opportunities. Some individuals, unfortunately, amongst colleagues and the public, historically there's been individuals who may at one time or another weren't able to transfer and now feel the need to potentially use this as a vehicle to do so, hence why they all come across my desk and we take a look at every one of them to validate. We have every student registered. The 100,000 students plus are registered in our system. We know where they're from. We know where their last residence was. We know where they might be going. We have the attendance zones, the playing zones. We have all of that, and all that goes into it in an expeditious manner, which I'll be doing a lot of in the next 14 to 21 days, if not longer, looking at each one of those individual cases with my staff and getting those approved.
And doing your best to have these student athletes play where they can.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative Amy Freeman for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Some of my questions have been answered, and I really do appreciate you all coming together and meeting with the speaker and chairman and other members about how to move this forward. I'm a mom of 4 kids. My youngest is now in college, but I had 2 who played football. And one of the questions I have as a mom who has worked and volunteered and helped with a lot of the different things for entry, when you're talking about 50% capacity at a venue, mean, sometimes you're outside. If I got a lot of emails about volleyball, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
As did I.
So, but then basketball is coming. I even had someone call me yesterday about soccer. So they had to take their kids out of state to play soccer right now. So I'm wondering how. I know these schools sometimes depend on that money, and parents are in charge of collecting the fees. And so if there's going to be a temperature check, or if there's going to be a way, is it going to be up to us as the parents to be the police of that? I mean, are there going to be rules that LHSAA puts out? I mean, I think about the tournaments that my kids played in. Sometimes even two of mine were big cross-country runners. So, getting the fees and all that is how you run these events. And it's only 50%, I'm somewhat concerned about how they're going to run, and if you all have thought of that as the athletic association, how you're going to be able to help the schools maintain their programs.
During the regular seasons of all the seasons that we have, the individual LEAs or the schools oversee all of that, including how many student athletes you can have in a certain area, or in this case, you're talking about fans. The local fire marshals are the ones who also oversee how many people in some of these rural communities. You can put some people in a gymnasium,
right.
Standing room only sometimes. So that came down. I've been working with the Department of Ed and Mr. Brumley and Mr. Bradford on getting some language in regard. That came out yesterday. So the 50% piece was, at one time there was conversation about 25%. We'll see how that plays out at this juncture. But when it comes down to taking gate receipts and working at the gates, you probably were a volunteer mom. A lot of schools actually have assigned staff that do that as well. And we'll work our way through those processes. And if we're going to take temperatures, that's something we're going to still talk about on what that protocol will look like. And we have work to do between now until we get to next week. But the good news is, next week, our board meeting, we have volleyball that's going to start competitively. And I think that as of today's announcement, I believe that's going to excite some of the volleyball parents, and they can now get an opportunity to go watch those matches. And my assistant director who oversees volleyball, Ms. Karen Hoyt, is probably watching this, but is also going to be diligent in regards to now we know where we're going with it, and establish that with the volleyball advisory committee, and communicating with the schools as well, which I will do with the principals and once we get past today.
And then my other question is about safety, and some of those questions have been asked, but I'm following up on how I understand that there's going to be a way to trace, and I even know of a school in my area where the athletic trainer came down with COVID, so like the entire football team was quarantined and a bunch of other kids who'd gone to the athletic trainer. So that has already happened in my area. But is there a threshold that y'all are going to come up with? And I don't have a copy of the Our Lady of the Lake guidelines. So, if there's 2 players on the team, or if there's 5 players on the team, like the school I know of, that it was that my nephew goes to the school, and it was like my sister got an email that the athletic trainer had COVID, and so her son wasn't affected because he runs cross country. But is there a threshold? Because when the proximity of football, and what's that number or percentage or something, so that okay, this team can't travel to Lafourche Parish to play because there's too many cases or something.
And I cannot answer that question today. Okay. In regards to the threshold, I'm going to yield to our medical staff to give us that, versus also as well as I have not seen the document that was referred to earlier. Okay. We're on it.
I haven't seen it either, so I just want to make that point, that I think it's really fair to the parents to know that threshold at some point.
I'm sorry, Representative Friedman. We'll get a copy of the letter to you. I apologize. I thought it had been passed out. But.
No, I don't think I received that one. But anyway, I just want to, I'm thinking as a mom, how that might be frustrating to me if I didn't know until the last minute.
And I don't, as I sit here today, I don't know if there's been a threshold established of how many cases you may have on your campus in the general congregate group before you're supposed to keep everybody home. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
So it's got to probably be lockstep with that.
Yeah.
But if I might, just for a second, Mr. Chairman, let's say in the football scenario, or it could be the head volleyball coach is also a teacher.
Yeah.
And that teacher comes in contracts the virus. Now that teacher's been in a classroom all day with how many students, and they're out practicing everything to practice with masks and social distancing. As a principal, now obviously have to notify the parents of the volleyball students, which may be the same as some of them in their classroom. Now, what do? We bring a substitute teacher in, we move those in. Now, all those students all have to be quarantined. Those are all guidelines that I can't speak to today. I'm not sure how that would work at this point.
Okay. I'm just thinking of the safety of the parents and
That's a good point.
and Representative Carter was talking about, kids who do live with people with pre-existing conditions. So
We're going to try to have everything in order before we roll this thing out, ma'am.
okay, great. Thank you so much for all your work on this. I really do appreciate y'all coming to the table and doing that work.
As are we.
Thank you, Representative Freeman. Before we go on, let me give you the gist of this. Is from Catherine O'Neill, MD. She's the Chief Medical Officer at Our Lady of the Lake, and she's an Assistant Professor of Infectious Diseases at LSU Health Sciences Center in Baton Rouge. And the crux of our letter is, I'm going to read it. I don't like to do that, but I think she says it the best. If we continue on the current track we are on and the rate of spread does not increase over the next 2 weeks, I support moving to the next step and allowing contact within practice on September 14th. Once we resume full practice sessions, if we do not detect outbreaks resulting from that contact, I fully support games being in early October as the current plan by the LHSAA. When the Friday night lights turn on, we want them to remain on, as do all of us, on for the entire season. We can only do that if we do it the right way by taking a slow and deliberate approach, following strict guidelines. We will ensure when we resume these sports that our children, their families, and communities are kept safe. The approach I recommend will also increase the likelihood that once we start playing sports, we will not have to stop playing sports due to outbreaks. She couldn't be here with us today, but she submitted this for the record, and I will get a copy to all members. And if the press wants it, you're certainly welcome to have a copy of it as well. Representative Mack for a question.
I just want to thank the chairman for allowing me to sit here today temporarily. Don't normally serve on this committee. I'm not on the committee, but I do appreciate him allowing me to have some input.
Anytime, Representative Mack. You're more than welcome in education.
Thank you very much. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Bodine, for doing what you do best and doing what LHSAA does best, and that's promulgate the rules so that these kids can participate and not only develop athletic skills, but as a former college athlete, I can tell you my athletic career, it helped me develop social skills. It helped me understand other cultures and where other perspectives, where people were coming from. So it's not just really about playing ball. It's about life lessons. And that's really what high school athletics is about. And as someone who advocates less government, as I know many of my colleagues do that sit on this in this committee, I appreciate everything that your organization is doing to get us out of it, to get government out of it, so that you can do what you do as best. Because that's where it should be. It should be your organization, the parents, and our local school boards, local autonomy. And the last comment I'll make, I have another meeting at 10:30, so I do appreciate it, Representative Garofola. But I want to thank Jeff Landry and the Attorney General's office for issuing his opinion, and I know that's alleviated a lot of your concerns, and just want to put that thanks there as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Mack. Okay, members, we don't have any more questions on the board. Mr. Bonine, I really, really appreciate your, all the work that you've put into this, your cooperation over the last several days as we've been going back and forth with this. And I have to thank you as well, Mr. Boyer. You guys have worked really hard. I know you have. And I know that we're going to have a successful season. I'm really excited to say that we will have Friday Night Lights coming up shortly. Thank you guys very much for coming to testify today.
Thank you.
Okay, and I will stay in touch. Don't worry about that. Ms. Holloway, are you prepared to come to the table? Okay, we have Ms. Holloway from the Board of Secretary, from Bessie, that's going to come to the table. You bringing Mr. Brumley with you? Okay, you guys, if you don't mind. And Mr. Brumley from the Louisiana Department of Education. Actually, our superintendent, Dr. Cade Brumley, from the Louisiana Department of Education. And as we're doing our kumbaya, I have to really thank you guys. I mean, we were on a conference call last night for quite some time, making sure that we had all of this in place and we were doing it correctly. And to that end, I've asked, and the speaker has asked, Mr. Brumley to come to the table and give us a little overview. I mean, we've discussed several times that the Bessie and the Department of Education don't control extracurricular activities, including, in particular, LHSAA events. So we just wanted to make sure for the record that you guys were willing to come to the table and make sure that the public knows that. Dr. Brumley.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank you for all the efforts that you have put into making today happen, as well as the other committee members. From the beginning, the Louisiana Department of Education has worked with experts on this virus to help our systems have a strong start to the school year. And I think across the state of Louisiana, we have done an outstanding job in a measured way of finding a way to get students an education. Certainly we realize that as we beat back this virus, we'll be able to be more aggressive with having additional students in buildings and additional practices. And so far we've had great success with being able to have students in buildings, as well as some students being virtual based on the opinion of their parents. Specifically to your question, Chair, the BESI guidelines that were, or rather BESI policy that was passed, was absent any language relative to LHSAA sanctioned athletics. We never viewed LHSAA sanctioned athletics within the purview of the Department of Education or BESI. So when the question comes up, where is athletic language in the bulletin, it's intentionally not there because we never saw it as our role to make policy for the LHSAA. However, outside of the bulletin, in our guidelines, we did include a statement, and I'll read the statement for you. It's available at louisianabelieves.com on our Strong Start page, as well as hundreds of other pages of guidance. But this particular guidance says athletic activities are allowed to resume with the recommendations put forth in the Louisiana High School Athletic Association's guidance for opening up high school athletics and activities. So we feel that we have very clearly stated in our guidelines that LHSAA sanctioned activities are within the jurisdiction and purview of the LHSAA.
I think that answers that question. Ms. Holloway, anything to add?
No, I don't. He said it very well. But thank you so much for all of you. We've worked very well together. We've come together for the sake of our children. And as a BESI president and representing our BESI board, our responsibility is for the academic success of our students. And of course, all of us on the board are very pro and excited about football or sports or whatever it may be. That's where I have come from, being very involved with athletics. So in saying all that, I do appreciate our legislators that have come forward, along with Dr. Brumley from the State Department, and recognizing that what's best for children, and allowing the LHSAA to provide athletics and with our superintendents, and that BESI watches over, and we're excited to start football again. So thank you.
Well, and I have to say that in speaking to you guys and other members of BESI, that I haven't spoken to anyone yet who has a problem with playing football. And in fact, everybody wants to play football. So I'm really glad that that is the case. And I know we're going to have quite a few happy families in Louisiana. Thank you guys for coming. We don't have any questions, for coming and to testify and tell us hello today. Mr. Stiles from the Attorney General's office had asked to make a little statement, if you don't mind, Mr. Stiles. We are. That's coming later in the agenda. Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
And just can you introduce yourself for the record, please?
My name's Bill Stiles. I'm the Chief Deputy Attorney General. I just want to thank particularly Representative Mincy for asking us this question. I also want to thank Mr. Bonine and Mr. Boyer for their full cooperation with our office to help us help them get to this point where we could issue this opinion. I'd like to thank you and the speaker and everybody else involved on getting us together. But really what I want to do, on behalf of Attorney General Jeff Landry, I'd like to thank the ladies, the moms, the parents that are in these overflow rooms, because as Representative Wright said, you know, it's a beautiful thing. Sometimes we forget about it, but we represent the people. And at the end of the day, we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And when they get going and they get our attention and our focus on what needs to be done for the people, it usually happens. So it really all started with them, and I want to thank them very much for doing it. And specifically to the ladies of Dunham, I want to let you know that we're probably going to see you gals in the playoff this year. And go Panthers, Catholic High School, number 23, Carson Stiles. Thank you all very much.
And wait, don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. I wanted to thank you. I mean, we were on the phone pretty late last night and trying to hammer all this out. And I wanted to go ahead and go on record and say that I did speak to the Attorney General, who would like to have been with us today, but he had a previous commitment.
Yep.
And you're here representing him, and you guys got this opinion out in record time. And we really, really appreciate all the work that you did on that. And I have to say, I agree with the opinion. So for whatever that's worth.
Well, thank you very much. And we've actually been working on it since Monday. When this issue started, we jumped on it. We knew where this was going. It was already basically drafted in my head. And some of our staff, and we just threw it out on the paper yesterday and all through the evening and early this morning, and we were happy to do it. So thank you all very much.
And I do have a question from Representative Mincy, who actually requested the opinion. Representative Mincy.
Yeah, not a question, but just a...
Sorry.
Come on now. Not a question, but just I want to echo the chairman's comments and just really thank the Attorney General's office and you, Mr. Stiles, for your timely producing of this opinion, so we can move forward this morning. So thank you very much.
It's our pleasure. Thank you all.
And thanks again, Mr. Stiles. We appreciate you coming today. Okay, members, I don't have any more questions for any of the. We have no more questions, but we did on the notice put a little note that we would like to have an update from. We're going to ask Mr. Brumley, Dr. Brumley, to come back to the table to give us an update on the issues with the impacts to the schools in the western side of the state from Hurricane Laura, if you don't mind, Dr. Brumley. And again, this is Dr. Brumley, Dr. Cade Brumley, the Superintendent of Education.
Thank you, Chairman. I had the opportunity earlier in the week to make a trip to both Calcasieu and Jeff Davis Parish and visit with system leaders out there. And I can tell you with great confidence that the pictures that you see on social media and the newspapers do not do justice to the damage and devastation that Hurricane Laura has caused to that community.
Dr. Brumley, can I interrupt you for just one second? I think we had some parents who wanted to testify on this issue. Let me wrap this up real quick. Please stay at the table if you don't mind. Members, I neglected to read into the record. We have 44 cards in favor. I'm not going to read all of the names of in favor of having Friday night football. We have 20 cards who are here to testify that for informational purposes only. I would ask anyone in the audience in either room, if you still have something to say after we've come to this agreement, if you can come forward now. I mean, we have kumbaya, and we really don't want to do anything that's going to mess anything up. So, I mean, if you guys can, Mr. Kevin Hayes, would you want to come up? Do you mind if Dr. Brumley stays at the table with you?
No, absolutely.
Okay. Introduce yourself for the record, please, and tell us.
My name is Kevin Hayes. I always tell you who I represent. I'm representing Charlie Hayes. This has been a hell of a week. These ladies behind me have busted their butts, done various things, been on radio stations, been on TV, things that parents shouldn't have to do to promote their kid. I have sent, many of y'all have requested information. Representative Edmonds, you were here ready to go. I know that. These moms need to know that. Ms. Freeman, your assistant Allison, we've talked many a times in the last couple of days. I'm glad Mr. Bonine's looking at Alabama. I have that pulled. I've sent that to a lot of y'all, the best practices. It was updated 2 days ago. I am so thankful that everybody got together here. These kids deserve it. Thank you.
Very emotional testimony, Mr. Hayes. We really appreciate that, and I can echo what you're saying, and I can tell you that in speaking to the parents, the coaches, and the students that I've spoken to, that your sentiments are well received and they're echoed quite loudly across the state. I didn't say before, but I mean, we've received several hundred, maybe I said it, several hundred, if not thousands of emails on this subject, and I can tell you overwhelmingly, if we had any negative at all, that that was certainly the exception and not the rule. So I can tell you that people in the state of Louisiana are ready to play high school sports and high school football in particular. Would you like to say something? I don't have your card pulled out. Can you please introduce yourself for the record? Yeah.
Claire Harbison, and I
representing yourself, your parent,
my son, Blocker, Harveston, and really
Excellent.
parents across the state of Louisiana, I think. I'm not going to say what I did come to say, but I did want to share, because I was going to campaign for this to happen, and it's happening. And so thank you to everyone who's made that happen. But one thing that did happen this week that was pretty amazing as we walked through this is we started we created an email account to hear from athletes across the state, because we just felt like when we came here today, their voices would be the most impactful. And Representative Almady has a stack of 200. We've to this date, or at this moment, we've received about 300 emails, and I just wanted to share with you 3 of them that I had pulled, so that you can think about how happy these guys are going to be when they get the news today.
If you can summarize them for us instead of
Let me
reading
just
them.
read one. Okay. This is one of the best ones, and I think he just says, I have a dozen D1 colleges looking at me through camps and off-season teams. None have offered due to lack of film, and my college education and career is depending on whether or not I get to play this season. I'm a senior, and I've waited 4 years for this season. So that's Matthew McAllister, and I don't know where he plays, but I know you've made his day today. So thank you.
And I don't mean to cut you off.
That's
because,
okay.
but,
I just want to say thank you.
We know the magnitude of the situation and all of the effects, and that's why we've been working so hard to try to resolve the situation. And we appreciate you coming to the Capitol today. And again, I don't want to cut anybody off, but I certainly don't want to belabor the issue if we don't have to. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Lemoyne. I am representing Silliman Institute in Clinton, Louisiana. As a former public school coach, teacher, principal, and superintendent of a school district, I'm a retired employee. I'm a lifetime member of the Louisiana High School Athletic Association. I understand the value that they put forth in our state, and I certainly appreciate this effort. And my purpose today, and I'm proud to sit by my former colleague, my purpose today is to bring out a point that I think was left out in this entire process. I do realize that with the legislation that was passed in June, with the mandates provided from the legislature to Bessie, to the Department of Ed, to the LHSAA, the timelines and everything went quickly. But I think during the process, schools that I represent, and both in Louisiana and outside our state, have been left out. We're part of the Mid-South Association of Independent Schools. There are 14 football playing schools that in Louisiana that participate as part of the MAIS. The MAIS has 120 schools with 40,000 or more students in 4 states. This entire process directed us to follow the Louisiana High School Athletic Association's guidance, and I understand they've done a great job, as did the Department of Education, in providing those guidances. But one size doesn't fit all. Our seasons are different. We're playing softball, we're playing soccer. There's no guidance in what was released to tell us how to start softball and soccer. So you think you've had pressure. I've had parents for 3 weeks. MAIS has been playing football since August. I've had parents for 3 weeks on our board and on our administrators to play football and follow the MAIS, but if we do so, we jeopardize our immunity granted by Act 9. And so this entire process has brought a lot of stress on all of us, but more so on us because we're only one of 2 schools in the state of Louisiana that belong to the MAIS, us and Oak Forest Academy and AMEET, that have chosen to follow the governor's orders and Bessie and the legislature in doing so that we can maintain our immunity to civil litigation as granted by Act 9. We've reached out from Dr. Brumley's office to the Board of Bessie, to the Governor's Council, to the Fire Marshal. We submitted a plan for reopening. We've done all of the things that we thought was necessary to do so safely, and here we are. We have chosen to play football next Friday, both because of the lack of direction or lack of guidance that's been provided to us in reopening, because we don't even get the language from the LHSAA because we're not a member. I have to call on former friends and colleagues that are still part of the association to get this secondhand. Now, no fault to the LHSAA, so why would they send it to an organization or a school that's not a part of their organization? And so with that, I ask that, and hopefully, God forsake, we don't have to go through this again, but for any reason, we have to back up and look forward to more guidance as to reopening again, that consideration be given to the fact that not everyone plays in Louisiana belongs to LHSAA. And, we're playing softball right now. There's no guidance to open softball. What do? Not play? Because if we play and not follow this, then maybe we're not following the governor's minimum standards of health. And so I do appreciate your effort, the time you allow me to testify here this morning. I appreciate Dr. Brumley, Mr. Bonine. As I said, I'm a lifetime member of the LHSAA. But hereforth, just understand that we're not all part of the same association.
All right, and this is news. I think a lot of us did not realize that we had schools in Louisiana that were not a part of the LHSAA. So what I would ask you to do is to stay in touch with my office. I will do the best that I can to get information to you, but legally it seems like, and I'll tell you that under the Attorney General's opinion that we have today, I believe that as far as football goes, you guys would be covered by from the act that we passed in the regular session. I don't have the number. There's a second act that we passed previous to Act 9. And I believe that it would afford you guys immunity for football in particular, but probably for your other sports as well. But if you're not a member of the LHSAA, you're not governed by Bessie, then...
We're all governed by Bessie. We're an accredited Louisiana school.
Okay, so you're governed by Bessie insofar as the education mission, but not the sports mission.
Right.
Okay.
And let me add, one of the reason we did not, and we have not played football to date, because we try to teach kids that rules are rules, and we follow rules. And if the governor says don't do this, as whether it's directed by the LHSA or any other organization, we're going to follow that. But it's disheartening knowing that rules change, as it did last Monday, to accommodate, and like it will next week, to accommodate the LHSA schools, rightfully so. But it's disheartening when we're not even part of that. We're not playing volleyball.
Absolutely, and I don't think we've changed any rules here today.
Well,
I think we've clarified what rules apply and how they apply. I don't think we've changed anything. And to that end, again, I'm offering right now, and I'm sure that Dr. Brumley and I'm sure that Mr. Bonan will work with you, and if you reach out to them and share whatever information and whatever safety guidelines they have, and so that we could look. All of our goal is to keep the students and the athletes safe. We all know that.
And we're going to follow the LHSA guidelines for football. I think it was well written, it's researched, and it's best practice. And certainly we maintain that our number one priority is the health of our students. And so for that, we'll follow. The unfortunate thing is that had we got the Attorney General's opinion 3 weeks ago, we would be in week 3, not starting in week 1 next week.
Well, a lot of things had to happen to put that into motion. But I'll tell you this. To the extent you said that there's only 2 schools in Louisiana that are not members of the LHSAA?
That are not playing. There are 14 football playing schools. 12 of them have chose to go to Mississippi to play their games. We didn't feel that was in the best interest for our school.
If you could give me some more information on those schools and if they're members of what organizations they're members of, so that I can look into it and see if we can develop a plan to kind of at least work with you guys so that you know when we issue guidance like this. And I agree with you. God willing, we'll never have to deal with anything like this again. But to the extent that we have to, we want to make sure that those schools that have Louisiana students registered and attending are covered and are safe as well. So, and I appreciate you coming to testify today. Don't hesitate to reach out to my office, or any of us. I mean, we need to know this, and we want to help you as much as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemoyne. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Coach Fertitta? And I'm assuming, did you fill out a white card or a green card?
Green card.
Okay.
I promise to be less than 60 seconds.
You had a question?
It's really from Mr. Bonine, so maybe we...
Okay, well, I'll ask him to come back to the table because we went back onto the issue. Okay, I'm sorry. Coach?
My name is Gabe Fertitta. I'm the head football coach at Catholic High here in Baton Rouge. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank everybody who came to the table today, but especially thank all of the people that gave the coaches the guidelines that we had to follow starting in March and that we still currently are following. And I just wanted to have this on the record. Because of the LHSAA, Eddie Bonine, and all of the guidance that we've gotten, I wanted to share this to alleviate some of the concerns that people may have. Because of that guidance, at Catholic, we've been able to return to workouts, conditioning, drills, modified practice sessions with very limited community spread of the virus. And following those guidelines, These are the numbers. We put 418 athletes through our weight room and through our fields every day for 3 months. And over the course of those 3 months, following the guidelines from the LHSAA and from Bessie and from the CDC, we maybe had one community spread case on our campus. And I think that's a kudos to all of the coaches across the state, the players across the state, and their parents, and the LHSAA for all coming together, putting the guidance out, following the guidance, and keeping our families and coaches, we have a lot of coaches who are high risk, safe during this time. And without their guidance and without that, we wouldn't be sitting here at the table today. They put us in that position. So I wanted to make sure that we publicly thank them for all of their work. Thank you.
No, thank you for coming today. And I have to mention, members, that Coach Fertitta is a fellow Holy Cross graduate. While that doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, it means a lot to me. And Coach Fertitta reached out to me early on and was helping me to navigate the system and figure out exactly where the hitches were. And I appreciate that very much, Coach Fertitta.
Chairman, thank you so much, and thank y'all.
Absolutely. Anybody else wanting to come to the table? Oh, come on up. Well, we should only have one person at the table.
They're all together. Some boys from Jennings High School.
We wanted to say thank you.
Thank y'all. You're the man.
Hey, why don't you give us your names real quick and
Tanner East,
Colby Estes, Lawrence Lord.
And which high school?
Jennings.
Well, good luck, guys. We really appreciate you coming today, and we appreciate the thank you as well. But we're going to make this happen. I'm excited about it. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else? Just introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
Hello, I'm Eric Kearns from Fontainebleau High School, and I just wanted to ask about like the 50% you were talking about. So, is there going to be like?
Did you fill out a card?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. What's the last name?
Kearns.
Kearns?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
So, as people are walking in, are they doing like a number check or is it a certain
Well,
amount
yeah.
of people?
Typically, when witnesses come to the table, they don't ask questions. But I will try to help clarify that for you. It's my understanding at this point, and I'm not the expert. We can talk to Mr. Bonine again. But it's my understanding that the state fire marshal has issued an edict on his Open Louisiana Safely. I think it's opensafely.gov website that says that for stadiums of this type, that yes, it is a 50% capacity rule. I'm unaware if it says anything about checking temperatures or not, but you can certainly go on Open Safely Louisiana. Is that the URL? I think it's Open Safe. If you Google Open Safely Louisiana, it'll come up and give you all the regulations with that.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Kearns, thank you so much for coming today. Anything else?
No, and thank you again.
Absolutely. Please, you have a question? Wait, hold on 1 second, Mr. Kearns. Representative Carter has a question for you.
Mr. Kearns, we just want to make sure, are you a student athlete?
Yes, sir.
At what school?
Fontainebleau High School.
Okay, before you leave, we'll make sure you get all the information to answer any of the questions too. So don't disappear, okay? All right, thank you. All right.
No problem.
Thank you, Representative Carter. Anyone else would like to testify on the Friday Night Lights issue, the high school football? I'm sorry? Yeah, I'm not rolling on yet. Your light's still flashing. Thank you, Representative Hilferty. Hi, introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, my name is Ryan Talley, representing myself and my son Brady. Just wanted to say thank you for your decision to move forward. One thing y'all touched on briefly, but I really want to highlight is just the mental anguish that these kids have gone through. I have 2 teenage sons, and the anxiety that they've, realized with the anticipation of sports is really, taking a toll on them. So just know that going forward, that's really a big deal, for these student athletes. I did have a couple of questions though about the details of the season. I guess we can't ask questions.
Well, it's not really appropriate for a witness to ask questions, but we'll get you, as Representative Carter said, if you hang around for a little while,
okay.
We'll get staff to talk to you. And did you fill out a card for us, Mr. Talley?
Yes.
Okay. Green card or?
White.
White card. That's why I can't find it. Just want to make sure we have it in here for the record. Any other statements you'd like to make? Okay, all right. We'll get all that information for you before we leave today.
Thank you.
No, thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Anyone else would like to come and testify at the table? All right, if we can get, you said it was Representative Hilferty for Mr. Bonine? Yes. Mr. Bonine, you mind coming back to the table for just a minute? I'm sure you're enjoying sitting at the table for all of this, Dr. Brumley, but we appreciate your patience. Thank you. All right, Representative Hilferty for a question.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is, in some of our parishes, I represent Orleans and Jefferson, they have restrictions that are, in some instances, more restrictive than those for the rest of the state. Has there been any, I know this has all been happening very quickly, has there been any dialogue with those parishes? Because we wouldn't want to have it where one parish has students in one parish are under a different set of guidelines. I guess I'm just thinking of that scenario.
We haven't addressed it as of today, but prior to today, when the state moved from phase 1 to phase 2, I know that Orleans Parish remained in phase 1 for a longer period of time, a different set of issues there in regards to COVID and for whatever reasons. And the most recent order that kept the state in phase 2, I had been notified that if we had moved to phase 3, that they were going to remain in phase 2. That was just somebody calling to give me a heads up if that came down the pipe. Obviously, we didn't move to the next phase, and we're still in that phase. With what we're addressing today, we're still, the phase piece now becomes the LHSAA's competition stage 1.
Okay.
As we move forward, so that we are not confusing that, but we are, from what I understand now, unless there's other limitations that I'm not aware of at this point, restrictions in Orleans Parish, what we approved today will allow those schools to participate in football.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to understand.
And potentially I think the next piece that's going to be probably the bugaboo is going to be the who can get in and how many people can be there. I think that's going to come down to that.
I did receive a tweet, and I just want to question from a constituent. I want to make sure that it's clear. We've been talking a lot about football, but certainly there are children that play soccer and some of those other sports. Soccer is. This gentleman that tweeted said that soccer, currently they were having to go to other states to play their soccer tournaments. Is soccer currently allowed to be played right now under LHSAA?
Well, some of the guidances that we'd reached initially, soccer was considered a contact sport, and there the debate between the soccer community is it should be a moderate or not a full contact sport.
It seemed that way.
And we're still working with that because the guidance from the National Federation does say it's moderate risk in that regard, so it's not considered contact. We're working our way through that piece as we speak.
So if we're doing this with football, which I think we can all agree is a contact sport, then soccer, I would imagine, would be ushered in under the fact that we're moving forward with a full contact sport.
It is, and those individuals who are traveling out would be the obviously this time of year would be the club soccer groups that are traveling, and my assistant director of soccer is probably watching the stream, so he was prepared to start working with the soccer community and adjusting the language so we can continue to participate in soccer and not have to leave the state.
Appreciate it.
But no, we don't oversee club soccer.
I totally understand. I think some of these club groups are understandably looking to follow, LHSAA's lead.
And we do appreciate that.
So I appreciate you answering a question that's maybe a little out of your wheelhouse. So thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
And Mr. Bonine, before you leave the table, Mr. Kearns' question about entering the stadium, do you know, have you guys set out any recommendations regarding temperature checks, or are you just going to rely on the fire marshal?
Well, we're going to work our way through that piece before we get to next Wednesday's meeting with our committee. But as I know it now, depending on the language in Act 9 of people coming onto school campus, is that just during the school day or school hours, or is it also going to be in the evening? I'm going to reach out to those respective LEAs, see what's going to work for them. What is their local fire marshal state? And then we're gonna get everything in writing, so we're all on the same page when it comes down to that. There was one question about season length. I believe someone here say something about season length? I don't want to get on the weeds on this, but the seasons are going to continue forward. Football would start as was scheduled, 8th, 9th, and 10th. It'd be an 8-game season, which actually finishes up in that weekend after Christmas in the Superdome for the Prep Classic.
Yeah, I think that was Mr. Talley's question. Does that answer your question, Mr. Talley?
That was one of them, yes.
Okay. All right. We'll get you guys together before we leave, and we'll figure out what's going on.
And there'll be more coming out of my office as we get past today.
Excellent. All right. Wait. I have a question from Representative Brest.
One quick question, Mr. Bonine. Have you had any conversation with the state fire marshal as if will the players, coaches, dance teams, cheerleaders, will they be considered as part of the capacity number? Because if you look at a football team, you may have combined over 200 people. When you look at the coaches, players, cheerleaders, dance team members, will those individuals be considered or counted amongst the 50% capacity?
In the outdoor venue, as we say in this regard as football, we have the group that are inside the lines, we have the group that's outside the lines. So we're not in an indoor venue, so the capacity, the football teams, the essential personnel, again, remember, we'll stay in those static groups of 25 as we set up the sidelines and extend the coaching boxes and do that. So those individuals, which I believe the Alabama paperwork as well as Tennessee does address the support groups. In this case, the dance teams or the cheerleaders, also the bands. We have to adjust bands and how that, because that was also addressed in initial COVID stuff as well as the bands playing. So all stuff we're going to take into consideration and get guidance and know what we can do and how we're going to do it. Question is 50% of the stadium is, let's say it's 3,000. So it's 1,500, or does that mean the capacity, 50% capacity on that side, 50% capacity on the visitor side? And I have not had direct communication with the state fire marshal. I've been working that through the Department of Education.
Okay, thank you.
And it's also my understanding, in speaking to some of the Department of the fire marshal, that there's a lot of space in the end zones where people can space out, and that probably would not be taken into consideration with the 50%. I'm just, for whatever it's worth, I'm hoping that is allowed to happen as well, because I think that would tremendously expand the capabilities with these stadiums.
And there will be times that this will pop up, and we're going to have to address it and see what it is and address it accordingly. But we're going to use common sense and try to make sure we don't do anything to make a wrong step here as we move forward. We don't want to do that.
Representative Carter for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to ask some follow-up questions, Mr. Bonine. We have some kids who have some questions, some students, some parents who ask questions, and I'm sure we have many other people who have questions at home who are watching. And information is changing really fast, and there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what's going on. My question is, where can the public go, parents go, students go to get the latest information?
You can go to our website, LHSAA.org. Actually, it's Beyond the Game.
You said it really fast.
I'm sorry. We have Beyond the Game at LHSAA Beyond the Game. That's our mainframe. LHSAA.org. You can go on our regular website, and our updated information is on there. As of today, that's not updated.
Okay, good. Because I just want to, because I don't want false information. I want reliable information as fast as possible. And thank you for the website where you have that information, beyondthegame.com?
Beyond the Game, yes, sir.
Okay, and the other question was, I would imagine that, well, I guess two questions. One, do you have a section of frequently asked questions, like you're anticipating questions from some of the student athletes and the parents on that website, and maybe even a phone number where those parents can call in with specific questions and things of that sort? If you haven't done that, I would just encourage you to do so.
And I appreciate the encouragement. We're working on it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Carter. Members, any other questions for Mr. Bonine before we let him go? Okay, thanks again, Mr. Bonine, for coming today to testify.
All right, Stephen.
Just let me read for the record on that issue. We received in the Education Committee's office 173 emails in favor of commencing fall sports, 106 emails in favor of increasing attendance at events for family members and fans, mostly about volleyball. We received zero opposition to going forward with Friday night sports. And we, as I think I said before, we had 44 cards in the committee in favor, and several cards that were here for informational purposes only, and some of those we heard from at the dais. Anything else, Ms. Bornay, before we move on? Okay. You have a question? A comment? Representative Larry Freeman for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. If you'd indulge me for 1 second, I would like to recognize one of the student athletes out in the gallery. His name is Colin Gagnon. I've been coaching Colin since he's 6 years old, along with my son. And that is one of the reasons I got so passionate about this, is he's one of my Beta boys, the Beta Spring boys that we coached since he's 6, and now he's a senior in high school and has an opportunity. I think he's gotten at least one offer, and if he has a really good season, he has an opportunity to get maybe some other offers to go to college. And his dad's a sheriff's deputy and his mom's a teacher. So obviously you know that college is going to be a hardship for them. And having the opportunity to play is really something that he's looking forward to and his family's looking forward to, and it gives him that opportunity. But I did want to recognize him for coming down here, being part of the process, and that's really important for our young people to become part of our political process. So thank you, Colin. I appreciate you coming down and look forward to seeing you play this year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. And Colin, on behalf of the committee, welcome to the Capitol, and thanks for being involved. I mean, Representative Freeman's absolutely correct. And we, as hard as we try, and as many people that contact us, unless we have input from people like you, we don't always know the true story. So please stay involved. Don't be afraid to come around, and don't be afraid to call us when you have an issue. Thank you so much for coming today. All right, members, we're going to go ahead because we have, I think I read all the cards and the emails into the record.